And our next guest this morning, Mr. Kawa Hassan, a non-resident fellow at the Stimson Centre. Sir, thanks very much for joining us this morning. All right, a lot of things to talk about, of course. There were the peace and negotiations happening in Cairo, but ongoing, unfortunately. But yeah, let's move to what's happening in Rafah. The Israelis already deciding to evacuate the city. Tell us, what do you know about what's happening there right now?
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. So indeed, this morning we woke up to this news from Israel that, Israel has started warning the residents that, they will evacuate them. And in their words, it will be a limited, operation. So we don't have too much information at this stage, but it seems that the Israeli government, Netanyahu particularly, is really wanting to put extra pressure on Hamas, while the future of the talks in Cairo are uncertain, and the gaps between both parties remain quite big. But also on the other hand, Netanyahu wants to appease the ultra-nationalist, right-wing ultra-nationalist elements in his government, Ben Gvir and Smotrich. So it's a very dangerous situation. And really, it's anyone's guess to predict what would happen in the coming, hours and days.
That's right, and it seems that Netanyahu, like you said, is playing to the ultra-nationalist element within his country. But what kind of percentage of the entirety do they form, really? Because there's already a lot of protests about the actions of Netanyahu's government in Palestine. Why is he playing to them rather than those who are out on the streets protesting?
Well, I mean, the reason is clear. As you know, he faces corruption charges. That's first and foremost. And second, while the ultra nationalist, members in his cabinet are not influential to impact the decisions impacting the war, but they can impact the political future of Netanyahu. I think this is key. The political future of Netanyahu is at stake. So should, for instance, a deal will be struck with Hamas and the ultra-nationalist members will withdraw from the cabinet, his cabinet will collapse. And that means most likely early election will be called. And according to the polls, if elections were held today, Netanyahu will lose. So that's the sticking point at this stage. If you look at the Israeli political scene, the political future of Netanyahu at stake.
Right, so we do see that Netanyahu, without the victory, the lasting victory over Hamas, he will not be reappointed whatsoever. Now, having in mind recent events that we witnessed, how realistic do you think is the success of the ceasefire talks now currently being held in Cairo? And what are the major obstacles to achieving a lasting ceasefire there?
Right. So actually at this stage, the chances are almost, I would say 50-50, maybe even 60-40, the chances of that talks will collapse and we won't have a deal, and there may be an operation in Rafah. Why? Because the gaps between Hamas and Israel remains very big in terms of what they aim to achieve from a deal, while Hamas wants to end the war and that Israel will withdraw from Gaza, and that there will be, displaced Palestinians will be allowed, all of them, allowed to return to their places. Netanyahu government opposes this. What they want basically is really to put maximum pressure on Hamas, and also keeping the card of attacking Rafah, and also opposing a mass return of Palestinians to the north. And they want to have a say in who should be allowed to return to their places, right? So here we have a big gap between both sides. And as it stands right now today, it seems really, U.S., the mediators, U.S., Egypt, Qatar are doing their best to push for a deal. But it's not 100% sure that a deal, maybe in the making, should Israel go ahead with this, the government to attack Rafah, but also if Hamas will stick to its gun, because also Hamas and some other groups, they attacked a crossing in Gaza a few days ago, which means also, they want to put maximum pressure on the Israeli government. So as it stands right now, unfortunately, the chances of having a deal is not that big.
All right, so we know what the Israeli government want. We know what Hamas want, but what about the civilians that are being pounded every day in Gaza? How do we know what they want? And one way that we used to be able to know at least a little bit was through Al Jazeera, and it looks like we're not going to get that either, are we?
That's a very good question, because we tend to focus on the warring parties, on the big players, the media, but less on the population, the civilian population in Gaza, which is really caught in between. I mean, with or without having Al Jazeera there, I think the overwhelming the majority of the population in Gaza, they want an end to the fighting. They want to go back to their homes and places. So if I follow the news from Gaza, and there are also very good, reliable websites, but also posts from inside Gaza, which really reflects the view of the population, and that is really, they want an end to the war today rather than tomorrow, and go back to their places, and hopefully at some point there will be a reconstruction. So it's key also that we keep focusing on the plight of the civilians in Gaza, and not only focus on the warring party. So I'm really happy that you posed this question.
So, and having also in mind the situation of the civilians, do you think that still the two-state solution is on the table? Is it still possible?
It's at this stage is theoretical. This is a theoretical discussion about a two-state solution. What we see right now is really all the diplomatic efforts focus on first having a deal, a temporary ceasefire or a pause in the fighting, and talks continue between U.S. and Arab countries, particularly Saudi Arabia, Egypt, about post-war settlement. But any talks at this stage are theoretical, actually is paying lip service to the whole idea of the two-state solution, because it's very hard for me to imagine how a two-state, how a Palestinian state would look like if it was announced tomorrow, because Gaza is being destroyed, and a large part of West Bank, under control of the Israeli army and settlers. So it's, to me, the whole idea of a two-state solution at this stage is quite far-fetched. It's very theoretical, and yeah, I mean that's what I can say about that.
Well, the situation certainly does not look promising for anyone, and but particularly it doesn't look promising for the civilians in Gaza, who are unfortunately caught in the middle of all of this. Sir, a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.